All right, I know it's 7 o'clock right now, but we're gonna wait on just a few more folks to join us. We'll probably get started in around um, 2 minutes or so. All right, I think we will get started with the webinar now. Thanks for everyone who has joined on this very nice night. I'm Grace, I'm the Community Outreach Intern for MadiSUN. Yeah, just want to remind folks that we do have the Q&A function. So if you have any questions while the webinar is going on, feel free to send those in there. We also do have the chat. So I'll try to be paying close attention to those. We'll answer them as good as possible in real time, but there will be some time at the end for questions. So make note of that. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Sam.
Thanks, Grace. And thank you everyone for joining us on this balmy evening. Good evening for solar. I am Sam Denisti. I am the Distributed Resources Director here at Renew Wisconsin. So Renew administers the MadiSUN programs on behalf of the City of Madison. We've been doing this for 6 years now. I've been doing it for 4. So it's a really great program. And we're going to talk a lot more about the program and about kind of solar in general too tonight as well. As Grace pointed out, there is the chat and the Q&A function. That being said, we have a relatively small group tonight. So, if you want to raise your hand, Grace can even unmute you as well. I would rather take questions than just lecture people. I'm not like a college professor, so I'd rather just have a kind of a back and forth. So please feel free to shoot questions in whatever way you think is best. So we're going to be talking about a few things tonight. I also want to point out, I always like to talk about this. I always like to start with the slide because this photo in the center here is not of a MadiSUN installation. The other two are, but it is a photo of my parents' solar array in Minnesota, outside of Duluth. And I always like to start out with this slide because I can say, if solar works there, it can pretty much work anywhere. So I just want to kind of go over our agenda tonight. We're going to talk first off about how solar works. We're going to talk about reasons folks want to install solar on their own homes. We're going to be talking about probably the most important thing, economics and incentives and things like that, costs essentially. And then we're going to also talk about what the process actually looks like and some next steps. And then we're going to hopefully, if I stay on track, we're going to leave some time at the end for proper Q&A session as well. But like I said, if you have questions in the meantime, please feel free to drop them in the chat because I would rather, like I said, make this more of a discussion than a lecture series. I also have on with me tonight some friends, some co-hosts. I have Nick with me from Full Spectrum Solar. Full Spectrum is one of the installers that we work with in the residential group buy program. And I also have Jessica and Bethany from Green Penny Bank, and they're going to be talking a little bit later about some of the financing options as well. So I just want to thank those folks for being with us tonight, and thank you all, of course, for being here as well. So we're going to talk about how solar works, and this is probably more obvious on a day like today, but if we had been doing this 2 weeks ago, it probably wouldn't be as obvious. Most people, when they think about solar energy, they think of like the desert Southwest. They don't always think of Wisconsin, but solar does work in our state, and there's kind of some misconceptions about the components of a solar array. It's a relatively simple simple project, or a simple working component. So there's really only two components of a solar system. That's the solar module, which I think most people are familiar with, also known as the solar panel. And then there's also an inverter, which some people may not be as familiar with. So the module, the solar panels, if you will, they're kind of the front-facing part of the system. They do the work of converting sunlight into electricity. This takes place through a chemical reaction. There's a couple of different layers of silicon. When the sun kind of shines through those layers, it excites the electrons. Those electrons are then sort of funneled into wires, which goes down and feeds the electricity in your home. So because there's no machine parts, there's not a turbine or anything like that. There's no because it's just a chemical reaction. There's very little to break down. So these solar panels typically last a long time. All of the panels that our installers use have a 25-year warranty, so they're expected to last at least that long, if not longer. And they're typically about the size of a door. There's actually a couple of different sizes, but if you kind of, if you're thinking about panels and you're looking at your roof, trying to figure out if you have enough room, kind of think about, how many doors you can put on your roof, essentially. The other component is the inverter. And this is typically about the size of like your electric panel box. So if you can kind of picture that size in your home, you can kind of picture this sitting next to it, or maybe somewhere close. This kind of does the behind the scenes work. It converts the direct current, which is what the solar modules make, into alternating current, or AC, which is what our lights, our phones, our TVs, our appliances all use. That's the kind of electricity they use. There's also sometimes solar systems will have something called a microinverter, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's just much smaller inverters. Typically, though, they're not located in your home. They're located onto or next to your solar panels as well. So like I said, the solar module kind of is like the forward-facing part of the array. The inverter kind of does the behind-the-scenes work. There's also ways for you to connect your inverter to monitoring equipment. So we all have these right now. For the tech nerds out there, like myself, there's like phone apps and other things that you can use to connect and see, what your array is producing in real time, seeing what your home is consuming in real time as well. So it's really exciting. The inverters, because there are a few more like working components with them, do tend to break down a little bit faster. There are warranties as well for the inverters. But typically, this is one of the few things you might actually have to maintain in your system over the lifespan of the system. So let's see these components in action. So this is essentially how a solar array works. And when we talk about solar arrays, especially residential solar arrays, 99.9% of the time, we're talking about a grid-tied solar array. So what is that? That means you're still connected to the grid. It means if power goes down, unfortunately, you won't be able to use electricity, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but that's just how it works. The good news, however, the flip side of that coin is that when your solar array is not producing enough electricity, say on cloudy days or at night, you can still pull in electricity off the grid. You will not notice, you'll not be able to tell if your TV is being powered by solar electricity or by the grid, by a coal plant or a gas plant or something like that. So to kind of backtrack a little bit, let's talk about how these solar arrays function. So the sun shines on your panels, again, it excites those electrons. Those electrons then move down to your inverter, again, where they're converted from DC electricity to AC electricity. That electricity then flows through your meter and into your home, to your lights, to your appliances, et cetera, et cetera. And then, like I said, because you have a grid tied array, if your solar array is producing more electricity than what you need, that electricity will actually flow back out onto the grid. That's number 4. So that's your meter will kind of essentially dial backwards at that point. There will be a credit that will be associated to your meter for every kilowatt hour you export onto the grid. And then, like I said, at night or on cloudy days, when you actually have to pull electricity from the grid, you'll do so just as your home does now, and then your meter will dial forward. And then at the end of the month, that electricity is calculated. So you will be able to figure out if you are either, if for the month, if you've imported or exported electricity to the grid. And the process or the policy by which they kind of keep track of those energy credits is called net metering. So this is a way essentially for your home and for your solar array to kind of act as like a virtual battery. So like, as this fun little graphic shows, at night when you're pulling electricity off the grid, your meter will dial forward. On sunny days, or when your array is producing more than enough electricity, your meter will actually dial backwards. This is a little deceiving because typically when you install solar, you'll actually do a digital meter, so it just keeps a little more accurate track. But essentially, you can kind of think of this as how your meter is going to operate going forward once you have solar. So this is really good for many reasons. Having a grid tied array is good for many reasons. A lot of people think that, if you go solar, you're going to be off the grid. You can do that. It's not necessarily the best way to do it. But having this net metering policy is really helpful because it basically allows you to take that excess electricity and kind of bank it for future use. This is maybe a better representation of what net metering looks like on a daily basis. So this is a real person's electricity consumption and production throughout the day. So as you can see here, this area in red, this is where this person is, the area in red is where this person is consuming electricity. So there's a lot of spikes here. This is probably like a refrigerator or something cycling on. Right here, this looks like it's around breakfast time where this person is maybe grinding some coffee or something like that. And then in the evening, there's some spikes here as well also. The area in green is where this person's solar array is producing excess electricity, more than what their home is consuming. So all of this area in green essentially is electricity being exported to the grid. And then the other area, the area in blue, is self-consumption, or where this person's home is using that solar energy in real time. So as you can look, the area in blue is definitely the smallest, total area, which is another reason why net metering policies are super important. We're basically, as homeowners, we're able to take that area in green and essentially kind of smooth it out to those areas in red, or at least in terms of our bill, the bill that we get from our utility each month, that's what it kind of looks like. So hopefully this is a good way of showing, our homes don't use electricity as steadily as solar is produced. So this is a good way for us to kind of offset or fill in the gaps really for that missing electricity. I can definitely take questions on that if there is one. I thought I may have seen one pop up. Grace, is there one?
Yeah, there's one question from Brian. He wants to know if net metering applies only to the electric bill, or would natural gas be included in the total, as they're looking to move away from gas, but haven't gotten.
That's a really great question. So net metering is just for the electric portion of the bill. So let's say you were to try to disconnect from the gas. Gas is where most people where we get our heating from in Wisconsin. You might use it for cooking as well, but for the most part, it's going to be your heating, right? So if you're thinking of going to like a heat pump or maybe some sort of baseboard heat or something like that, and you disconnect from the grid, your gas part will go away, but it probably means your electric bill is going to go up, right? So but I guess the short way of saying it is it just applies to the electricity portion, because your what you're producing there in the green is just electricity. You're not producing any gas. Hope that answers the question. All right, we'll move on. There's a lot of, we could talk really all night about net metering and different policies and things like that. I can certainly take more of those questions at the end too. So if you do have more, we can talk about that later. The last thing I want to talk about here before I kind of shift subjects is when we talk about, how solar works and how to produce solar, we want to talk about what makes for a good solar ready home. And the very first thing that Grace and I looked at when we're evaluating homes, and Nick too, I should say, is how much shading is on your rooftop. If you have trees and things like that are going to prohibit your solar production, it's going to make solar a really hard sell for you, even for people who are, maybe very environmentally friendly and really want to move off of fossil fuels. It's really going to make it a very hard fiscal transaction to make. So that's what we do. That's the first thing we look at is your rooftop shaded. Second thing we actually look at is the age of your roof. And we do this for a couple of reasons. As I pointed out earlier, those panels will last for 25 years, a lot of times even longer. They're warranted for 25 years, but just like a car, most people will carry that well beyond the warranty period, right? So because panels will last for so long, ideally you want to go in with a very new roof. Now, this isn't to say you can't put solar panels on an old roof, but if you do, and then later on you have to go in and re-roof your home, you're going to have those panels. You have to have someone come in and disconnect that system, remove the panels, put on a new roof, and then reconnect the panels. And that definitely is going to eat into your return on investment time. So that's why we say, if you have like a 20 or a 25-year-old roof, it's best to just replace that right away, rather than, do the solar and then maybe do it 5 years down the road or something like that. That doesn't mean you have to have a brand new roof. If your roof is only like 5 or 10 years old, totally fine to put solar on top of that. But that's kind of the second thing we look at. The third thing we look at actually used to be the first thing we looked at, which is your roof orientation. So a south-facing roof is the best. That's going to yield you the most efficient sort of return. But that being said, with increases in panel technology and panel efficiency over the last 5 years, east and west facing roofs now are totally okay as well. This didn't always used to be the case, but again, because of those technology increases, because of the net metering policies we have in place, east and west facing roofs are totally okay, assuming, like I said, they're not really shaded by trees or anything else. And then the last thing I want to point out before I move on is ideally you want an energy efficient home. Now this, again, also, none of these things, like I said, are like hard stops for anyone for getting solar. But with an energy, ideally, you want to make your home as energy efficient as possible. And the reason for that is the kilowatt hour you never have to produce or consume is the cheapest one, right? Like if you only have to consume a certain amount of electricity and you're reducing your total usage, that means you can purchase a smaller solar array, and that's going to save you on cost as well. And then ideally, you can maybe spend that money to make more efficient panels, maybe purchase optimizers as well that will make that system even more efficient. But essentially, you want to kind of make some upgrades if you have very old lighting or if you have old appliances or things like that. You want to do that first, just because it's going to allow you to purchase a smaller array, and it's just going to be a smaller investment in general. So just wanted to touch on that before we moved on. But I need to take a quick sip of water because it's warm out today. And I wanted to give Nick a chance to weigh in to either correct me if I misspoke on anything or add in anything that I may have forgotten.
Yeah, I would definitely say that I agree with everything you've said, Sam. The industry does tend to move a little bit in certain directions, so I'll just make some minor notes. Most of our systems, most of Arch's systems, I believe as well, are installed with microinverters, but you'll still have that box in the basement. And instead of an inverter, it'll be a combiner box, bringing all the circuits together and having the brains there. Sam did talk about microinverters, so you'll see that more often. They also function similarly to what he just referenced there as optimizers, which both of them kind of take a module and take the highest power out of those. I would say I would definitely agree on the south is best, but it's definitely not required. You might have like a 10% difference in some cases from south to east-west production amounts. So don't be too worried if you don't have a south-facing roof. But otherwise, I think that you know, not much to add really.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, and I assume there's also, you know, I'm still kind of catching up on the technology as well. I assume having microinverters allows you to monitor the system even more closely. Is that true?
Definitely having microinverters is going to be better than having a string optimizer with no a string inverter with no optimizers. Microinverters versus string with optimizers, similar level of monitoring.
Awesome. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about why solar in Wisconsin. As I mentioned before, you know, we're not Arizona, we're not California. Does solar really make sense here? It does, and I'm going to run through several reasons for why it makes sense in Wisconsin. So the first and foremost, solar is becoming affordable. I should say it has become affordable. Residential installations have come down quite a bit in price over the last few years, certainly over the last decade. They're actually starting to rise a little bit now as we're seeing prices rising pretty much for everything, whether it be solar or whether it be, you know, cereal. But the bottom line is, you know, combined with, like I said, net metering policies and things like that, solar is really becoming affordable. And with financing options too, it means more and more people have access to this technology. So what this graph is showing, the area in brown and blue, that is where we're seeing the costs. So as you can see, costs for solar since 2014 have declined, as you can see there, and starting just last year, actually starting in 2020, I should say, those costs have started to tick up a little bit. But like I said, costs for everything have started to tick up as well. And the important thing is that green line is soft costs. That actually has come down a little bit too over the last few years. So soft costs typically now make up for a majority of the system cost. So the components generally will make up less than half of the system cost. But the important thing to remember is this is kind of like, you can kind of think of this as like purchasing 25 to 30 years of electricity up front. And we're going to get into more about that a little bit in a little bit. But the important thing to remember, again, like I said, is the costs have come down quite a bit, and solar is now affordable for a lot of folks. Solar is also super reliable. If you haven't been able to tell yet, I really like GIFs and moving images. So a lot of folks, again, we talk a lot about misconceptions about solar, and I think people assume that, you know, it's like a thin pane of glass, and it's actually not true. It's more like if you've played basketball, it's kind of like a plexiglass, like a kind of a hard plastic material almost. They can withstand a lot. They can withstand very large hail. They can withstand super strong wind gusts as well. Most of the panels, especially on homes, unless you have a flat roof, they're flush mounted to the roof. So you can really tell, you know, new residential solar arrays versus old. A lot of the old ones have panels at kind of odd angles, and they almost look like, you know, elephant ears or something like that. Now that they're flush mounted to the roof, they're kind of seamless to the whole architecture of the house. And it also helps to be able to withstand, you know, storms and other things like that. One thing that solar can't withstand, unfortunately, and this certainly comes into play in Wisconsin, is snow. A lot of people, that's the first question out of most people's mouth is, you know, what happens when it snows? Well, I can tell you that your production is going to go down, or it's going to go away entirely. Another reason why it's good to have a grid tied array. That being said, I think, you know, most people assume that, you know, in Wisconsin, we start getting snow in December or maybe even November, and then it doesn't go away until, you know, just a few weeks ago or a couple months ago. Typically, the snow is going to melt off of your panels faster than it's going to melt off of the rest of your roof, or even off of the ground for that matter. As you can see, those panels are a darker color, so they typically stay a little bit warmer. There's always like a little bit of electricity kind of flowing around through them, so they typically stay warmer. They are at an angle too, so most of the time that snow is going to melt on its own and slide off, but that could take a few days or in some cases even a few weeks. If we get one of those big heavy snowfalls followed by a severe or a long cold snap, that's definitely going to cut into your production value. And Nick can even talk about, though, our solar installers actually model that. So when they talk about, how much they expect your solar array to produce in a year, they actually kind of take snowfall into consideration. But something to keep in mind, when it does snow, you're not going to be making as much electricity as you normally would. Another reason why solar is really great, and sorry, I'm having trouble with my clicker here, is it creates jobs. These are jobs that cannot be outsourced. As you can see, we've really ramped up the amount of careers in solar over the last decade or so. These projections are supposed to go up even more over the next 10 to 20 years. We're going to be installing more solar, and we're going to need real folks like Nick and his team to install these systems. So this is another way for you to kind of help out your local economy, is to install solar. Solar also, for more selfish reasons, it can increase the value of your home. So let's say you and your neighbor, you live in the same subdivision, both of your homes are probably about the same age, probably about the same size. If you install solar and you and your neighbor go to sell your homes at the same time, your home is going to sell for more money and it's going to sell faster as well. And the kind of reasoning behind this, so this was a study done out of the NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So the study was actually done in Colorado, but other studies across the US have shown kind of similar results. And that is, if you have a home and your electric bill is significantly lower than the home across the street, that's going to be a big selling point for you. So this is another reason why, this is kind of the main reason why solar can increase the value of your home. And it doesn't factor into your home assessment for like tax purposes and things like that. And then the last thing I want to point out is, this is just kind of a summary of all the things, you can produce your own electricity through solar. So this is a reason why, solar and renewable energy is kind of popular across the political spectrum. You can save money on your bills, boost the local economy. One thing we didn't talk about is rising utility prices. So I talked earlier about how this is kind of like buying 25 to 30 years of electricity up front. That doesn't even take into account the fact that utility rates are rising. I think every utility in Wisconsin, their rates went up over the last year or two. They're probably going to rise more. I don't know if they're going to rise necessarily this year or next year, but they will certainly rise over the next 25 to 30 years. So that doesn't even take that into account when we talk about kind of our payback periods, which we're going to get to here in just a second. And then again, it adds value to your home. And of course, the obvious one, which I really actually haven't said yet, is you actually get a chance to switch to renewable energy. And this is becoming also more and more important, just kind of with the geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in right now. So that's it for kind of the reasons to go solar. So I'm going to move on now, because I'm a little bit behind schedule, to the cost, the economics and incentives part. This is probably the part most people want to hear about anyways, right? What does it cost? But before I do that, I want to just kind of talk about the benefits of joining a group buy. So MadiSUN is a group buy. We do a lot of things here through the program, but more than anything else is what we do, or what we aim to do, of course, is simplify the process. So, when you're looking to buy a car, or even buy a home for that matter, you can talk to your family, your friends, you can get an idea of, cars or homes they've bought. You can go on things like, Angie's List and see what kind of rates people did, or what kind of rankings different companies did. Solar is still pretty new. So there's not a lot of people you can talk to kind of figure out like which company should I go with, or what does the process look like. So we try to do that here with MadiSUN. We just try to make the process really simple. We pick out great installers like Full Spectrum and Arch to do these jobs. We educate homeowners. We sort of provide a non-biased, or what I think at least is a non-biased representation of what solar looks like. And then through collecting a bunch of homeowners together, we're kind of able to bring down the price a little bit through bulk purchasing and whatnot. So these are many reasons why, a group buy, is great. It can make a lot of sense. It can simplify the process. And we've seen, across the state of Wisconsin and really all over for that matter, this format really working out well. So this is actually a list of all of the group buys in Wisconsin. This is actually from last year. So I don't know if all of these are necessarily in effect this year, but you can kind of see how many installations these group purchase programs facilitate. So it definitely adds some renewable energy to the grid. It definitely makes the process easier for some people. So it's a really popular model of kind of helping homeowners out around the area. So I want to move on to some of the incentives. So the first one is our Focus on Energy incentive. If you are not familiar with the Focus on Energy program, definitely as soon as this webinar is done, or even maybe while it's going on, Google Focus on Energy. They have just a plethora of great, it's mostly energy incentive programs, but there are some programs for renewable energy generation as well. So if your home qualifies, you can get up to a $500 rebate. Although if you're in a rural residence, I don't know if that applies for any of us here, because I think most people are probably in the Madison area, you can actually get up to a $1,000 rebate. There are some qualifying criteria, however. In order to receive a Focus on Energy incentive, you have to be within, I believe now it's 130 degrees of due south. So basically your roof has to be anywhere but almost directly north facing. So you can face east or west, or even a little bit northeast or northwest and still qualify for that credit. However, you do have to have less than, I believe it's 10% shading, but that actually may have increased too. So your rooftop has to be relatively unshaded, and it has to lie within a certain incline level as well. Nick, I see you just popped on. Can you fill in those gaps for me?
15% shading is now allowed, which was a definite differentiation from last year. And I believe the tilt is 10% this year. But that one's I'm less clear on, although it's kind of interesting. You have to be 10 degrees tilt if you're like slightly north of east or west, which is kind of odd. But anyway.
Okay. Great, thanks. Awesome. Yeah, I knew they changed a lot of those qualifying criteria from last year. So I just trying to remember all that. Anyway, this is one incentive you can get. The other big one that most people are aware of, and I think what's driving a lot of interest this year, is the federal tax credit. So right now that tax credit is at 26%. However, it is scheduled to reduce starting next year. So it is scheduled to reduce down to 22% next year. And then in 2024, it will go away completely for residential installations. Now, that being said, Congress certainly can act to renew those credits or possibly even increase them. Don't let that concern you. If you're kind of on the edge, don't say, oh, I'm going to wait and see if they get extended, because even if you install this year, you can actually wait to collect those credits. So let's say they actually go up to 30%. Even if you install this year, it's not like you're locked into that 26% rate. You can actually wait and then apply the 30% tax credit next year if it gets increased to that, or even if it just stays at 26%, you can just wait and to collect those tax credits. There aren't any qualifying criteria for the tax credits other than you have to pay in that amount. So let's say your system, let's say you got back $3,000 in tax credits and you only paid in $1,000 to federal taxes. You wouldn't be able to get $3,000 back. You would only be able to get $1,000 back. But that being said, you can also roll those tax credits over from year to year, and that is for the entire amount of the system. So, if your system, let's say, was $10,000, you would get a $2,600 tax credit. So it's a big driver for installations, especially this year, and it's a really big rebate, which is why a lot of folks are installing this year. So let's. Now that we have a basic idea or basic concept of the incentives that we can apply, we can kind of do a cost exercise. So so this is a lot of hypotheticals that I'm going to throw at folks right now, but the average cost of a average size system, which is about a 5 kilowatt array, is about $15,000. Again, these are ballpark figures. This is just to give you kind of a basic idea. If you have a bigger house or a home that consumes a lot of electricity, obviously you're going to need a bigger system than that. But just going by the numbers, 5 kilowatts is about average. Average price is about $3 a watt. That can be a little more, can be a little less, depending on components and other things like that. If you qualify for a Focus on Energy rebate, that takes $500 off, and then the federal tax credit will take more off. And then this leaves you with sort of our ballpark or hypothetical out-of-pocket cost. So you can kind of see about how much it takes off. It takes 25 to 30%, depending on, well, I should say 26 to 30% roughly, depending on, the exact size of the system. But it can definitely, it's definitely incentives that are, increasing popularity. So now that we know roughly our out-of-pocket costs, we can kind of do an energy value calculation. So if we take that same hypothetical 5 kilowatt array and apply it to the amount of electricity that we'll make over the course of a year, depending on which utility provider we have, we can calculate sort of our annual savings. So if you are, I assume most folks are in MG&E territory, so that's MG&E's rates are around 14 cents per kilowatt hour. That will yield approximately a $900 savings. Again, if you have this 5 kilowatt array, if you have a bigger array, of course, it's going to produce more savings, but you're also going to be paying more in for your electricity in general. If you're an Alliant customer and your rates are 13 cents per kilowatt hour, your savings are going to be approximately $800 per year. And if you're on a municipal utility like a Sun Prairie or a Wanatee utility, your cost savings is going to be about $700 per year. So with that said, we can calculate payback or ROI. So typically for most residential solar installations in the Madison area, it takes about 10 years to pay that off. And that equates to, like I said, approximately $20,000 in savings over a hypothetical 30-year solar array lifespan. So there's lots of there's lots of savings to be had. Again, this is not even if we take into account rises in electricity rates, but it is, it's some significant savings. But as we can also see, it does represent some significant upfront costs. So this is the point where I'm going to let I believe it's Jessica or perhaps Bethany, I'm not sure, jump on and kind of talk about financing with solar, because this is an area I think that not a lot of people are aware of. There is a bit of a trying to think of the right words here. I think most people are just not aware that financing for solar is an option, but it totally is. So I just want to give Jessica a chance to talk about that now.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think you're right on with that assumption that not a lot of folks understand that solar financing is available. Not a lot of banks are in the space or comfortable with it. If you would go down the street and talk to your bank about how can I get a loan to put solar on my house, I would maybe give you a 10% chance of them even considering it, let alone doing it. Now, that being said, don't get me wrong, there's other banks out there besides Green Penny that do it, but it is definitely a new and emerging area. So a little bit about solar financing and Green Penny specifically. We are a virtual bank that's headquartered in Decorah, Iowa, that focuses on renewable energy. And we finance all types of solar projects. So tonight we're talking about residential solar, and we work with a lot of families who are interested in saving on their energy costs, like Sam has done a great job of outlining tonight, while also helping the environment. But Green Penny also does a fair amount of commercial solar financing with businesses, et cetera, across the Midwest. So we are just about 140 miles west of the Madison area, and a local Midwestern provider, like I said, that has a lot of experience in the solar area. We've been financing solar for the last 15 years or so under the Green Penny brand for the last 2. Without getting to a whole lot of details, our residential program has a couple of different structures that families can consider. The main items that I think are important for you to take away, at least this evening, is You can, with qualifying credit, finance 100% of the project through a Green Penny loan if you would like to. We also have a structure that takes into account that federal tax credit that Sam outlined. If you're eligible for that, if you want to break up the loan in 2 different parts, we can do that and work with you. You also can put money down if you'd like to. So lots of different options out there. You can see all the information on our website. Our rates are out there, the whole 9 yards. The other thing that's important to know is that you can finance a residential solar system for up to 20 years. We do have a tiered interest rate structure, so the interest rates go up with the longer you finance the project. And again, you can get that information on our website, but you can finance 100% of it with no money down, and you can finance it for up to 20 years if you'd like to. The last thing that I would add about Green Penny is we're friendly, we're pretty transparent. We really, really work hard to make sure that folks understand what they're getting themselves into from a financing standpoint, and make sure you understand where your costs are going to be, et cetera. And folks like my colleague Bethany, who's on the screen here as well tonight. Bethany is one of our residential lenders. And if you apply and you start working with Green Penny and you happen to talk to Bethany, she's going to be who's with you the entire way through. So we are very much, even though we're a virtual online bank, we pride ourselves on community, small town service like you would see just, down the street from you. So again, we're Green Penny. You can learn more at greenpenny.com or give us a call there. And if there's any questions throughout, we can visit about it. But I think that covers it, Sam.
Thanks so much, Jessica. That was great. We love working with Green Penny. But that being said, if you do go through the MadiSUN program and purchase a solar system, you do not have to use Green Penny. There are many different options for paying. Financing is an option. A lot of folks will pay, with cash or savings. Some other people do a home refinance loan, especially if they've already been in their home for a while, or maybe they're doing some other home renovation projects. The point of this is to say there's a lot of options. So if you don't have money sitting around in your bank account right now, that's totally fine. There are other ways that you can go solar and you can make this investment in your home. So just want to thank the Green Penny team and Jessica for being here, and they're going to stick around too at the end for the Q&A session as well. So thanks. Now that we've finished kind of with the costs, I do want to put out one thing that's sort of semi-related to costs, and that is extra things you can put on. So there's a whole bunch of, maybe not a whole bunch, but there are some additional components that you can add into your solar array. And it's always easier to do these things at one time rather than to kind of do them a la carte, separately. One area that's really gaining in popularity right now is electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging. A big reason why this has become popular, why EVs have become kind of tied in with solar, is because not only can you basically purchase a system that will create electricity for your home, but you can also purchase a system that will create electricity and fuel for your car as well. So you can, increase your rate of return even more. Electric vehicles, even if you're not charging necessarily during the daytime or during the sunny hours, your solar array is still going to produce that excess electricity, like I said, and export it to the grid, and you're going to be able to get a credit for that from the utilities. So a lot of people are doing this around the office. We like to call it driving on sunshine, because your solar array is essentially producing those electrons, or the electrons that you would need to put into your vehicle. So that's becoming a really popular option. We can talk about maybe some of the costs that are associated with that if you're looking to move to an EV, or maybe even if you already have an EV. And then the other component that is not nearly as popular, but is gaining in popularity, is battery backup. I realize these are both pictures of Tesla products. I'm not like a Tesla fan necessarily, or I'm not saying you need to go with Tesla products. This just happens to be what the picture is of. But battery backup is becoming more and more popular for many different reasons. Some people just like to have either the newest technology, or these are the kind of the people that always buy the new iPhone when it comes out. And then the other people just want to have that peace of mind, knowing that if the power goes down, I'm still going to be able to power the basic needs that I have. That being said, battery technology, while it is coming down in price, still very expensive. But if it is something you're interested in, both of our installers do offer some battery options if you're interested in that. So now that I've kind of gone through everything, we're going to talk about the steps to installing. What does it actually look like? So the first thing, if you haven't done this already, I think most of you have, but if you haven't, the first thing to do is to sign the I'm interested form. Grace, you can put that in the chat for anyone who hasn't missed it, or for anyone who has missed it, I'm sorry. After that, what will happen is someone from MadiSUN, either Grace or myself, we'll give you a phone call. We'll talk about your energy use. We'll talk about obviously your rooftop and kind of the situation that you're looking at. We'll give you some ballpark estimates on size, cost, and rebates. I say ballpark because Nick and his team have access to a lot more sophisticated equipment and components than us. They do this 365 days a year. So they're going to be able to narrow down that for you. But what we want to do is we just kind of want to give you some general figures to make sure you're kind of in the right price range. And if it doesn't look good for you, we can make some other recommendations. And if it is good for you, then we can schedule an assessment with Nick or with our other installer, Arch Electric. Once that happens, the contractor will come out. They'll take a closer look at your roof. They'll take a look at your electric panel and some of the other components of your home in more detail. Then a little while after that, they'll issue you a proposal. This will give you specific details on the size of the array, the number of panels you'll need, the costs, the incentives that are available to you, and other things like that. If the proposal looks good, what you'll do is you'll contact Nick and you'll say, hey, this looks great. I want to purchase a system. They'll issue you a contract. And then once they schedule you into their queue, they will actually come out and install your array. So this whole process will take some time. Nick and I were actually just discussing this now because of the popularity this year. That queue is kind of growing, but the actual construction of the solar array takes very little time, a day, maybe 2 days at the most. So it's a very front-weighted scheduling time, but this is essentially what you can expect if you're looking to install a solar array. And Nick, feel free to add in any specific details on kind of what that process looks like specifically through Full Spectrum.
Yeah, I would say after that basically sums it up. We do go through the permitting process, so we'll work with your municipality, probably Madison, but also any other surrounding area. We'll work through with your utility, probably MG&E, but it could be Alliant or someone else. You've worked with all sorts of organizations, both utilities and municipalities, and then we'll try to make sure that we have a slot on the calendar. We have a lot of installs on the books right now, so we are booking out, as Sam said, quite a ways. Once the install comes, we'll work to get it installed. It might be a day, 2, 3 days sometimes for really larger systems. Systems can vary in size quite significantly. I mean, yeah, that's most of what we'll do, and we'll be happy to talk to you throughout the process and see if you have any questions that you need to have answered, or there are any updates that need to be addressed, or any specifics to your site. We can help work with you on that.
Great. Yeah, so happy to announce that we have reached the Q&A portion now of the webinar. So that means I can stop lecturing people and we can have a nice fun discussion. Very exciting with us tonight, not only in addition to Jessica and to Nick, but we also have Dylan Creed. Dylan is actually was a participant in the MadiSUN program a few years ago. So he's a real live homeowner that actually installed solar on his rooftop. So if you don't believe me, or if you don't believe Nick about how the process works, you can talk to Dylan and he can give you a real life example of what it looks like. So Dylan, thank you. And of course, Nick and Jessica, thanks also. And to Bethany too for coming back. So at this point, Grace, what questions do we have from the audience?
Yeah, we have one question from Peter. They want to know if utility companies might discontinue the net metering policies in the
That's probably a me question. There always is that possibility. Hopefully that will not happen. The tricky part about net metering in Wisconsin is it does vary utility by utility. So right now, especially from a residential perspective, Madison Gas and Electric has a really favorable net metering policy. Dylan could probably tell you specific details about how that policy works, but essentially, with a lot of utilities, they have what's called a monthly true-up period, which means at the end of the month, they calculate your bill, they see how much you've consumed versus how much you've produced, and then they calculate your bill based on the difference between that. The good part about being on MG&E is they actually, it's an annual, I think it's a rolling 12-month period actually. So you can produce excess electricity like right now in the summer months, May, June, July, and actually roll those credits over to more winter months, which is really great for Wisconsin because we just get so much different sunny hours between the summer months and the winter months. Dylan, do you have anything to add to that? You probably do because you've seen your bills.
Yeah, no, very fortunate to be in MG&E territory in this case, and because they do, and annual or 12-month or what have you. So my system, we sized it for about 95% of our estimated annual electric usage. So I haven't gone over that. So I can't confirm if it's annual or 12-month. We've been under that both times, but yeah, very beneficial. I have a coworker who is in Alliant territory, and they true up monthly, I believe. And so, we're kind of talking about our solar panels and our electric bills, right? And I definitely have the more favorable situation in MG&E territory. But yeah, it's great. It's fantastic to know that, yeah, I'm overproducing and kind of, being a utility for my neighbors a little bit in the summer and sending them some clean energy, but I'm still reaping the financial rewards in the winter when I'm not, obviously producing as much energy. So
Nick, do you see big differences between how you install arrays in Alliant territory versus MG&E?
Yes, definitely. We install closer to, as Dylan was saying, 90 to 95% in MG&E, closer to 80 to 90%, depending on the customer's usage. In Alliant, we've gone as low as like 60 on a quote due to certain systems. If you have any sort of like geothermal or heat pumping in Alliant territory, it's just it kills that. I would also say there is a minor note. There is a one edge case in which the monthly for Alliant is better than the MG&E. The MG&E, if you go over 100%, you get changed into another category completely. So you really do want to try to avoid that, because then everything you send back over or under 100% gets credited at 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Whereas Alliant, it's monthly, and every month where you go over, everything under 100% sent is still credited as that full utility rate. So if you're the type of person who's a super overachiever and you just want to produce as much as you possibly can all the time, Alliant is probably better, but you don't have that many situations that's the case.
Great. Grace, what's the next question?
Yeah, another one is asking if batteries are included as part of the system cost, and would they be eligible for the tax credit?
Nick, I think that's your question.
Yeah, so batteries are not included as the general cost because batteries are generally expensive. You're probably, keep in mind that when you install batteries, you're not only installing like a solar system, you're not just installing the solar. When it's the battery system, you're not just installing the batteries, you're installing the batteries, an automatic transfer switch, a critical loads panel, all the wiring, any sort of battery management system that you might need, the battery, cabinet, and in addition to our costs, you're probably going to need to install the batteries either outside, which is not a really good idea in this location because wouldn't really work with their warranties, or you're going to need to install them in a room that is fire rated, a specific room, and that gets really expensive. And even without that extra room cost, you're probably talking close to, for an average battery cost system, I would say an additional on top of the solar, $20,000 for a battery install.
So it sounds like what you're saying is batteries are nice, but they're not necessarily for everyone.
They're not for everyone. We've not surprisingly with that cost, I would say that not most systems are not installed with batteries. It's definitely possible. We can do it. Arch can do it. Just keep in mind that's what you should be expecting in terms of a rough cost.
Great, thanks. Grace, what's the next question?
Yeah, just one more. Brian is wondering if they were looking at increasing their electric usage in the future, could be electric cars or switching gas to electric or what have you. Do you generally recommend installing based on a current usage or a future usage? Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, why don't you talk about how you size systems when there's EVs or potential other, uses of electricity that maybe aren't obvious in their historical use, but definitely look like they would be incorporated going forward.
Yeah, I would say that if you're going to do something in the next year, we would strongly recommend installing the solar now, so you don't have to, so that you can take advantage of that extra use. The larger the system, the lower the cost per watt to install. However, once you go over 100%, as I was kind of saying before, you drop off a cliff. So you don't want to install it too soon. I would say if it's more than 2 years, you should probably wait because A, you're going to not reap the benefits in those 2 years, and B, things can come up. Just in 2 years, a lot of things can happen. So if you're going to do any sort of calculations with cars, it's actually not too bad. You can roughly calculate if you know roughly how many miles in town you're going to drive and roughly the type of car, it's pretty easy. You can say, okay, this many miles per kilowatt hour and, about this many miles. It gives you a really quick number that's relatively accurate. Other things, heating, a lot harder to compensate for, if you're going to install a heat pump, any sort of, gas electric range, that's not as big of a deal. That's a little bit easier to calculate. We can definitely take that into account, things like that. We definitely try to do as much as we can in that direction. So definitely bring up with anyone during a site assessment or even before if you're talking to someone. A good thing to discuss with us so that we are all on the same page.
Excellent. I want to go back to the battery question for a second, because I know that batteries definitely will increase the cost quite a bit. Jessica, does Green Penny offer financing for the battery as well? Like if you buy it all at once, can you finance for that part of the system as well?
Yeah, you can. We just added that to our financing options for residential solar within the last month or so. So if you're interested in solar and you want to add batteries as well, you can add that to your loan. You can either be 2 separate loans if you'd like, or you can do it all in one system. The only thing that you need to be aware of as a homeowner in that sense, the solar battery systems don't have quite as long a warranties as panels. Depends on what you buy and what you're getting into. Nick can probably tell you more about that, but you can only finance the battery system the length of the warranty. So that's something to be aware of. So that typically is one of the reasons why if someone's going to do it, it's 2 separate loans as opposed to one. But we do that. We also finance geothermal systems if you're interested in the energy efficiency part.
That's interesting. I did not know that. So even I'm learning something tonight. So I appreciate that. Thanks. Grace, what's the next question?
Yeah, someone wants to know if they can transfer a solar loan if they sell their home before they've paid off the loan.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that is it depends. So it's going to depend on who your loan is with, and whether or not the person who is buying your home is interested in taking on that debt. So it's going to be something that you negotiate with them. So I can tell you from a Green Penny perspective, we would consider and work through that sort of situation if it's something that you were interested in and all of the qualifying credit items, etc., were in place and made sense. But you also need to be aware that the solar loans are secured with a UCC1 filing and sometimes a UCC2, which is bank speak. But ultimately, what does that mean to the borrower is that it's going to show up when you sell your property as something that needs to be taken care of before you can move forward. So in that situation, when you sell your property, you're going to have to do one of two things, either pay the loan off or work out some sort of a deal where the person who's buying that property takes on the loan and the debt. And again, they have to meet the same credit criteria that you would to be able to continue that loan. Most often in that situation, people pay off the loan and then sell their property. But again, it depends. I will also tell you that there's other financing opportunities out there where that's not an option, that you're going to have to pay the loan off. In most situations, I think people end up paying it off anyway, just because it's less complicated. But again, those are some different options. Bethany, you're the lender. Did I miss anything in that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So
Great. So I see we're at time. I did want to ask actually one more question just for my own sake, and that I wanted to ask Dylan. Dylan, can you tell everybody what size solar array you installed? And then I'm not going to ask you how much it costs, but can you say like what size solar array you installed, and what is like the thing that you've discovered after becoming a solar owner that you didn't think about before you went solar?
Sure. Yeah. So the size of the system. So I've got a 12 panel system. It's a 4.32 kW. And this was installed in 2019, April 2019, I believe. So I've had it for just over 3 years now. Yeah, I thought, it was affordable to me at the time, and I had gone through MadiSUN, right? And at the time, Summit Credit Union was the financer. So I did get my financing through Summit and through MadiSUN. And so I thought that was great, right? I don't have to go out searching for that, for where am I going to get my financing from? Like, MadiSUN had that all locked in. I did work with Full Spectrum. I don't know if Brent's still over there, but he was a fantastic project man. He is? Okay, great. Yeah, he was awesome to work with and that whole team. So yeah, that's our system. Oh, and I was going to add, someone was asking about sizing. So I've got the 12 panels. We are planning to add on, right, electric load, probably an EV, maybe do like a heat pump water heater or some other kind of heating or kind of electrification of the home. So we sized for the kind of current use 90% or 95%, but I did opt to go for a larger inverter, so I can add panels on at a later date. Instead of having to install a separate or kind of two inverters side by side, I just oversized the inverter. So that was kind of our hybrid approach, maybe, of like kind of planning for the future on that. So what did I discover in the process? A couple of things. So maybe a little negative, but I was surprised the whole needing battery storage to be able to operate if the grid goes down, right? I was like, oh, I can be the neighborhood hero, right? Everyone could come over and charge their phone and have some cold food and whatever if the power goes out for a while. So that was a sad surprise, I guess. I was also a bit surprised at just how long the process took, and I think Sam, you had kind of spoken about that a little bit. The install itself was, full spectrum. It was 2 days, and it was only because it was windy and cold out on day one. Otherwise, they could have cracked it out in 1 day. So. Yeah, but kind of as I had said earlier, just knowing that when it's sunny outside, everything I'm doing in my home is being powered by the sun is fantastic. Anything I'm not using, I know it's going straight to my neighbors, right? Like it's not getting shipped off somewhere else. It's literally my neighbor, both my next door neighbors are benefiting from that clean energy. It's been fantastic. No maintenance at all to date. They get a little dusty, but then it rains. You get some snow cover in the winter, and maybe you don't produce for a month, but there's not a ton of sunlight anyways, and so it's financially it's really not that big of a hit. It's $5-10 maybe, I think, if I was guessing, that I'm kind of missing out on. So yeah, a couple surprises there, but ultimately super happy. I got my warranty extended to 25 years on my inverter. For like another $200. So like that was a nice surprise too. I didn't know I could do that. So it kind of matches the length of the warranty on the panels. So I know my system's all set to go for like 25 years. So I'm in good shape.
Well, that's great. We're going to end on that because I think that's a great way to end, and we're also at time. So I just want to thank all the other folks for joining us tonight, and thanks for everyone for tuning in as well. As Grace pointed out, this is recorded. So if you missed something or want to go back and review it, it will be available on our website as soon as we can get it up. Grace also is kind enough to put both hers and my emails in the chat. So if you have questions that you think about later on, either for us or for one of the guests, we can always forward that on to them, and we can get your questions answered that way. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again to my panelists, and have a great night.
Take care.